Will you please be all upstanding for His Worship the Mayor?
Ladies and gentlemen, I wonder if I could just remind you, as we normally do, that these proceedings are being webcast. So the content of the meeting will be recorded and broadcast subsequently on the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording could also be used for training purposes. I need to remind everybody in the public seating area that you are also covered by the cameras, and that by sitting there you are consenting to being filmed, and that those images may be used for training purposes. The Chair has the discretion to terminate or suspend filming if continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings, or that continued filming might infringe the rights of any individual. Please can you ensure that you use your microphone at all times to speak, because otherwise there's just a void in the recording. And can you please indicate when you want to speak, so that the Chair can call you and we will all be able to see who is speaking. And if you are seconding a recommendation, can you please also use your microphone and indicate that you want to speak. Thank you.
Right, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the council meeting of Wednesday the 25th of March. Agenda item number 1 is apologies for absence.
Yes, Mr Mayor, we've had apologies from Councillor Howard Barrett.
No. Right. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. And I remind members of numbers 1 and numbers A and B. Any declarations of interest? Right, we go on to item number 3, open session, minutes of previous meetings. Item number 3, Social Security Services and Social Regeneration meeting of Tuesday the 10th of February.
Can I move, Mr Mayor, Social Services and Regeneration?
Is there a second?
Second, Mr Mayor. Yep.
Oh. Item number 4, Cabinet meeting of Wednesday the 11th of February.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Can I ask you to vote, please?
That's carried.
Item number 5, scrutiny customer services of Monday the 16th of February.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Is there a second up? Any questions? Any comments? All right. Ask you to vote, please, councillors. One more.
Councillor Harvey-Jones. Thank you.
That's carried. Agenda item number 6, scrutiny chief executive, including crime and disorder meeting of Tuesday the 17th of February.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Second up.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any comments? Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors? That's carried. Agenda item number 8, joint negotiating and consultative group meeting.
Number
7. This one, right?
I move, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, can we go back to item 7?
Item 7, scrutiny schools meeting of Monday the 23rd of February.
I'll second, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder for the...
Yes.
I'll second, Mr Mayor.
Right. Any questions? Any comments? Right, councillors, can I ask you to vote, please?
Councillor John McCarthy. Thank you.
That's carried. Agenda item number 8, the joint negotiating and consultative group meeting of Wednesday, the 25th of February.
Would the Chair of School Scrutiny Committee wish to move that one? I move, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? Councillor Roberts?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Under apologies for absence, it says no apologies were received, but I actually gave my apologies for that meeting. Could that be noted, please?
Right, councillors, I'll ask you to vote, please. That's carried. Agenda item number 9, Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 25th of February.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Seconder.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors? That's carried. Agenda item number 11, the Audit Committee meeting of Monday, the 2nd of March. 10? I've missed one again, have I?
That's
Yeah.
it's just,
stuck.
it's just one
Yeah.
day.
I've got my glasses on. I've left my glasses at home. I left my glasses in Malta. Agenda item number 10, full council meeting of Wednesday, the 25th of February.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors? I lost my glasses.
Yes, that's carried.
That's carried. Agenda item number 11, the Audit Committee of Monday, the 2nd of March.
Can I move, Mr Mayor?
Seconded.
Any questions? Any comments? Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors?
Carried.
Agenda item number 12, Licensing Committee of Wednesday, the 4th of March.
I move, Mr Mayor.
Second up. Tony Chaplin. Any questions? Any comments? Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors? That's carried. Agenda item number 13, Licensing Committee meeting of Wednesday, the 4th of March. Is that a seconder?
I use the right button. I move, Mr Mayor.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors? That's carried. Agenda item number 14, Planning Regulatory and Licensing Committee meeting of Wednesday, the 4th of March.
I
Councillor
move,
Jones?
Mr Mayor.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? Can I ask you all to vote, please? That's carried. Agenda item number 15, Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 11th of March.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors?
Councillor Harvey Jones.
That's carried. Agenda item number 16, pay policy statement.
Chair,
believe the officers asked us to leave and leave us with the HR. First item. Right. Policy statement 2015 and 16. I think Councillor Phil Williams is taking this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for the publication of the pay policy statement for 2015-16. And as it says in paragraph 1.2, section 38(1) of the Localism Act 2011 sets out the need for Welsh and English authorities to produce and publish a pay policy statement for each financial year. And 1.3 says this is the fourth such pay policy. However, for year 15-16, there are a number of additions to comply with the recent Welsh Government amendments to the Local Authority Standing Orders Wales Regulations 2006, and they become effective from July 2014. Over the page, Mr Mayor, on page 42, you can see there under paragraph 2.4 that the requirement under those changes to the regulations is that all changes to Chief Officer's pay must be voted on by full council. However, if you look at the detail of the document attached, you will find at paragraph 14.2 that there is wording in there that actually will prevent any delay in pay being made to the senior people by the fact that the pay policy provides for that to be paid immediately unless there are issues which will have to come back to council. There are other changes, Mr Mayor. I think a significant one is in paragraph 2.9 is the requirement now for full council to approve severance packages of employees that are leaving the council where the value is over £100,000. That's an important one. And then in paragraph 2.10 we set out other changes to the pay policy, and I think 2.10.2 the acting up regulations are quite important there. So the recommendations are on page 43 and 44 at 6.1 and 6.2. Subject to questions and comments, I move.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Right. Any questions? Any comments? Right, councillors, I'll ask you to vote, please. That's carried. And can we have the officers back in, please? Right. Agenda item number 17, the medium-term financial plan for 2015-16 to 2017-18. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is to recommend for approval the medium-term financial plan for 2015-16 to 17-18, which includes the capital programme for the period 15-16 to 19-20. And then the very interesting bits which are called prudential indicators under the Prudential Code Framework for Capital Finance. I'm assuming members will have read the documentation. However, Mr Mayor, the report should have been considered by the Audit Committee recently, but unfortunately it was in quorate. So I need to ask Steve if he would take us through the report so that any members will have the opportunity to ask any questions. So over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Phil. It's just what we've actually got here is the actual follow-up report to the report which went to Council last month, which set our net revenue budget for next year at £113.265 million, and also set the council tax increase for next year at 4.5%, and that is included as Appendix A. We've also, with the Cabinet of Length of March, the Cabinet of Length of March actually agreed, and they recommended to this council the capital plans for the next 5 years, and those are itemised in paragraph 2, which is summarised as for 15-16 for next year, we have core capital funding of £11.614 million, and over the 5 years, that's £36.978 million. And our capital plans are again itemised as Appendix B. And the main part of this report then deals with the medium-term financial plan, and that is summarised in the main report in paragraph 3.3, which basically shows that although we have balanced the books for next year, we still have a funding gap then for 16-17 and 17-18, and it's nearly £5 million for 16-17, and that then gives us £10 million to identify over 16-17 and 17-18. So I think the best thing I can do now is to go through Appendix C, which is the main medium-term financial plan. And what is evident is on page 75, so that's page 75 under paragraph 1.5, is that the medium-term financial plan has very strong links with the corporate plan, with the asset management plan, and with the workforce plan. And those are shown in sections 2, 3 and 4 of Appendix C. If I can refer members to section 5, which is on page 80, and under 5.1 it states that the Institute for Fiscal Studies have basically stated that these austerity measures will be in place for just at least another 6 years, and it's in that context where the medium-term financial plan for 2015-16 to 2017-18 has been set. If I concentrate on the revenue settlement, which is shown under paragraph 5.3, and it's evident from figure 1 on page 81 how the revenue settlements have actually reduced from 2010-11 to a projection for 2017-18, and except for a little blip in 2012-13 and 13-14, it is quite evident that as far back as 2010-11 we had a settlement of plus 1.98%. For next year 15-16 we have a minus 2.52, and we have a projected estimated estimate for the revenue settlements for 16-17 of minus 3.07%, and for 17-18 of minus 3.57%. And as is evident in figure 1, it's evident how much the cash has changed from year to year. So for instance, in 15-16 from this current year, there's a reduction of over £2.3 million in pure cash, and there's a projection in 17-18 that there's a further reduction of nearly £3.1 million from that figure estimated in 16-17. So I think in figure 1 it's quite striking how the settlements have actually reduced from 10-11 to an estimated 17-18. In a similar frame then, if I can refer members to figure 2, which is on page 82, and this actually looks at our general capital funding. So this is our core capital funding. And once again, it's evident that from 10-11, where we had core capital funding of nearly £4.3 million, that has reduced now to about £2.6 million, and that has been the case for the last 5 years. As if it was the case that we'd still have had the £4.3 million every year since 10-11, then as an authority we then would have had a further £7 million to actually spend over those 7 years. If I could refer members to paragraph 5.5 and table 1 on page 83, and it's evidence there that as per our revenue outturn or our revenue monitoring statement, which was reported to Cabinet on the 11th of February, at that stage we are estimating that we will be in surplus for this financial year, and that's a surplus of £190,000. If I now go into section 6, which begins to look at a revenue budget for the next 3 years, and that is the 3 years of the medium-term financial plan. If I could refer members to table 3 first of all, where we've attempted to make the link with our spending for next year and with our corporate plan. And as you can see in table 3, we've itemised against the list of outcome areas for 14, 15, 15, 16, where we're spending our monies for next year. And it's evident from there that we are actually spending 60% of our net revenue expenditure on education and social care in 2015-16. Members will also see there that there's a core business as usual line, which is everything apart from those outcome areas which are shown on the top part of table 3. Again, in appendices 1 to 3, you'll be able to see for every single budget head of the authority where we're spending our money against our corporate plan over the next 3 years. If I could refer members to table 4, which is on page 85, and this begins to show how we've balanced the books for next year, and still we have quite a task ahead of us for 16, 17 and 17, 18. And it's evident from 2015-16 that we had a revised funding gap of nearly £5.7 million for next year alone, and that then led to over £16 million having to be identified over the 3 years of the medium-term financial plan. It also shows in table 4 the identified reductions which are helping to meet the funding gap for next year and over the next 3 years, and also our just other sources of funding, which includes a capitalisation direction of £888,000 for 15-16. This is where we are able to use our capital funding through capital receipts to finance our revenue expenditure in respect of costs of redundancy for 2015-16. But again, as I stated, we still have to identify nearly £10 million for 16, 17 and 17, 18. If I can refer you to figure 3, which is overleaf on page 86, and that really shows where we are over the next 2 years, is that our budget demand is on this upward level, is this upward increase, where our funding is in the opposite way. So that's the task over the next 2 years, is for those 2 lines to actually meet in 1617 and 1718. If I could take you from 6.5 to 6.8, that was already included as part of the council tax report which went to council last month. So if I can refer you to 6.14, which is on page 94, and this starts to look at how we are going to address our funding gaps for 1617 and 1718, and begins to address what the actual strategy is for the next 2 years and going forward. And the main thrust of the strategy is as identified in paragraph 6.14.3, is that the council has engaged with PWC, and they will be they just will be carrying out this operating model assessment across the whole of the actual council, and this will be identifying savings and saving options for the next 2 years, 1617 to 1718, and the actual outcome will be a robust medium-term financial plan, in that we won't be just balancing the books for 1617, but we will also have firm plans as to how the books are going to be balanced for 1718 onwards. So that is the intention of this exercise, and that is the actual outcome that we just will be looking for. If I could take members next on to section 7 of the medium-term financial plan, which starts on page 96, and just to basically state that our core capital plans for the next 5 years amount to nearly £37 million, and that is itemised in Appendix 10. What's also itemised then for capital in Appendices 11 to 13 are the sources of funding in respect of the 21st century schools, in respect of physical regeneration, and in respect of the riverside schemes, because it's evident that we do have a lot of other funding from just other sources, and to support our capital plans for the next 5 years. On page 99, and in the table at the bottom of the page, again we've linked our capital spending to the corporate plan in going forward. So this is the total core capital funding for the next 5 years, and again it's evident that the majority of our capital expenditure at 31% will be for schools, and that is raising standards of attainment. If I can refer members to paragraph 8, which is on page 101, and that begins to look at our indicators, potential indicators for 2015-16 and 16-17 and 17-18, and again in more depth those are included in Appendix 15 as the Council's Treasury Management Policy and its annual investment strategy for 2015-16. So again, that's shown in quite a bit of depth in Appendix 15 of the MTFP. So the final section of the MTFP is paragraph 9, which begins to look at our reserve strategy for the next few years. And the reserves of the Council consist of our Council Fund reserves, which are the general reserves, our insurance fund, our local management of schools, and the earmarked reserves. It is important to note under paragraph 9.5, when we start to look at the general reserves, is as per the just overarching aim of the budget board, our intention is that our general reserves should remain between 3.5 and 4% of our annual net revenue expenditure. So for this council, that means we have to keep our general reserves at around the £4.5 million mark, and that is the plan over the course of the medium-term financial plan. It should also be noted that there are no plans on to utilise any reserves over the course of the medium-term financial plan. And again, there's a summary of the reserve strategy as Appendix 16 to the report, which, shuffling through quickly, is on page 159. And what is evident from Appendix 16 on page 159 is that, as I said earlier, we are going to keep our general reserves at that adequate level of £4.5 million. But what is evident is that at this point in time our school reserves are quite low, and there needs to be further reports in going through 2015-16 for those schools reserves to be in a much healthier spot by the time we get through 15-16, 16-17 and the rest of the medium-term financial plan. So if I stop there and ask at this stage if there are any questions.
Firstly, has it been seconded?
Mr. Mayor, I haven't actually moved the recommendations yet, so the recommendations are actually on page 68, and they are 8.1 that the capital programme for 2015-16 to 19-20 of £36.98 million be approved, subject to confirmation of funding from external providers. 8.2 that the MTFP be approved, and 8.3 the prudential indicators contained within the MTFP be approved with authorisation of managing delegated to Chief Finance Officer. Subject to comments and questions and comments that way around, I move.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Right, any questions? Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not confusion or sort of flicking back on 4 pages. The Deputy Leader alluded to the fact already that our audit didn't have the opportunity of going through these papers last week. So some of the questions I'm going to be asking now have arisen out of that fact. Some of them may be technical and not answerable this afternoon, some may. So will you bear with me? I do have a few different questions. The first is related to street lighting. It's on page 78 and also page 112. The detail is on 112. The other part is 3.8. I note from that we are increasing the lighting budget by 11% and 8% in 2016-17, 17-18. We are taking a loan of £2 million, and there's a gross saving at the end of it of 2.7. So my question really is, why are we having to increase the budget year by year for street lighting, bearing in mind that it's bringing in that saving?
What just should be noted as well for what is shown for 16-17 and 17-18, that is what is actually required at this stage, but that doesn't mean that that's what is going to be set for those 2 years, because obviously we do have to find savings of £5 million for 16-17 and a further £5 million for 17-18. But yes, I do actually accept your point in that when we do refer to the street lighting reference within the body of the medium-term financial plan, it does basically say that there are savings. I haven't got that answer for you now, but I can get that answer for you and get back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's perfectly fine. My next question refers to page 103. And it's about earmarked reserves. And I note that over the past 3 years, our earmarked reserves have dropped by £3.64 million. Is that an acceptable position? Because with that sort of declining figure, it's totally unsustainable. So I'd like the political view, if you like, on whether or not we should carry on down that particular road.
The answer is quite simple to that one, Richard. The situation is that we've got a budget board in being, which is there to, as a prime aim, to ensure that we bring the reserves back up to the sustainable level that is required by the Audit Office and Welsh Government. That we are doing, and in fact, out of the surplus of this year's underspend this year, we're actually managing to put some money back into general reserves in order to build up the reserves to a level of 4.5%, which is £4.5 million. That's the general reserves. In terms of the specific reserves, there are a whole host of areas. If you want to go down that and talk about the specific reserves, just give us some pointers, or Steve, do you want to come in and make a comment?
If I could add on that, what we've basically got as well, if you note from table 13 then on page 105, is that the service reserves have reduced from £1.7 million in 12-13 to 400,000 in 14-15. What a lot of the reserves were for in 12-13, basically, they were held for that rainy day, and we've basically scrutinised every single reserve, and we've basically asked the actual managers, is that needed in going forward or not? And where it's been the case that that reserve was held there for just a rainy day and was not going to be used in the immediate future, that's why then we've put all those reserves into a central pot, and those have been used over the last few years as well, and to assist us in setting budgets over the few years. And if you recall, what I said earlier is that there are no plans now over the term of this medium-term financial plan, and for us to be using any reserves and to assist with our funding gaps in going forward.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Question number 3 then, if I might. I note that, and obviously debt rescheduling is important when we move forward, and it's related on page 77. Sorry, it's not page 77, that was the audit report, and I got sort of lost between two sets of references for myself on this. I think it's page 142 in the report in front of us now. But I noticed that we've got about £1 million invested at 0.5%. Would it be prudent to use that to reduce some of the debt on which we are paying a much higher rate of interest? It may be that financial regulations prohibit that, but it's a question that I think I should ask.
Yes, we can't really use that. We can't really use that investment and to assist us with the actual repayment of debt. What the investments can just assist us with is with some of the short-term debt, but here we're talking about longer-term debt. And if we were to actually redeem that debt early, then that comes at a cost. And that kind of analysis has been done already, and I'm afraid it's not affordable and to redeem that early debt.
Last one, I promise. It's on page 98, and I noticed that within the sort of capital spend in the future, that there is a reference there to the replacement of the expansion joints on the Fiddler's Elbow viaduct. It's a personal matter, this one, because there is also another bridge just there at the end of Pentoin Dainter which is collapsing, and there's no reference there to any money being put aside within the capital spend for that particular project. It's one which Ellis might either be able to answer now or to tell me in the future whether or not that bridge is in our sites.
There is an engineering list of bridge assessment, and what's gone into the capital programme has been on a necessity basis first, but I'll have to come back to you where the bridge you mentioned is in that list of priorities. I'll come back to you separately if you want.
Any other questions? Any comments? Right.
Okay, obviously by speaking I will close the debate, so can I just thank the officers for all the hard work that's gone into this document. It is a massive document. It's produced by a number of people, but all the effort has gone in from a huge number of people, so I'm sure we would all together thank the officers for the work they've done. It sets out in stark reality what faces us. So when the members of the opposition start raising objections to the cuts already proposed, I think they should give thoughts to two main things. First of all, will the cuts proposed result in a reduction in the level of service to our customers? That's the first question they should ask. And secondly, what alternative cuts would they come up with? They voted against the budget at the last council, even though they participated in scrutiny and audit, and seemingly without too much disagreement, because they all supported the fact that the figures put before them comes forward to the council of last month. They've never yet, to my knowledge, come up with any alternatives to the cuts that they've seen be put before them over the last couple of months. Can I just repeat that this document shows that we have no alternative but to introduce these cuts because they've been forced upon us by the Westminster government. And I would say that as part of the team here, we are proud that we're delivering so far with little or no consequences to our customers. And in fact, some of these cuts, which have been forced upon us, have caused us to look at the way we provide the services, and in fact the cuts have then enabled us to deliver those services to our customers in a better way. So whilst there are financial consequences, we're actually also improving the service we provide to our customers, and I'm sure that will be discussed somewhat later on in the meeting. So my message really is that, as those people in Westminster say, we're all in this together. So my plea to the independents is that instead of fighting against these cuts, could they just wake up, smell a coffee and join us in delivering?
Councillors, the recommendations is on page 68, numbers 8.1, 8.2, 8.3. Can I ask you to vote, please? I haven't. That's carried. Right. Agenda item number 18, discounts for long-term unoccupied properties 2015-16. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is the purpose of this report is to seek approval from Council on secondary legislation which allows councils to vary council tax discounts on long-term vacant dwellings. The body of the report sets out the whole concept of why we are trying to deliver what we're delivering. On page 163, the recommendations 7.1 to 7.3 set out the recommendations, and I so move.
Second.
Yes, second, Mr Mayor.
Right, any questions? Any comments? Right, councillors, I ask you to vote, please. That's carried. Agenda item number 19, the revised constitution for the Joint Supplies Service. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Council is asked to consider and approve the amendment to the existing Joint Supplies Constitution, and you'll see that paragraph 1.1 that the Joint Supplies Organisation is a joint committee between several authorities in our area. Paragraph 2 on page 168 advises that the last constitution was actually set down in 1996, so I think it's about time there was some revisions carried out to it, hence the purpose of this paper. And on page 169 the recommendations are in 6.1 and 6.2, subject to comments and queries. I move the recommendation.
Had a second up.
Yes, happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Right. Any questions? Any comments?
sorry. I'll start again. At 2.7 on page 169, the word should be stronger, not stringer.
Any other comments? Right, recommendation is on page 169. Can I ask you to vote, please, councillors? Carried. Agenda item number 20, proposal to deregister Glendale and Parkview. Councillor Brendan Toomey.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this report seeks approval to deregister Parkview and Glendale residential homes and to reconfigure the service into two supported accommodation models, which is now considered to have several advantages for the residents and is also considered as best practice in moving away from the residential care home status. Mr Mayor, Council may recall the full Council meeting on Wednesday the 11th of January 2012 when a question was asked by a relative of one of the residents of Parkview following, if I may say so, a very ham-fisted best needs assessment and consultation process between relatives of the residents and all the staff that were potentially affected at the both homes. The best needs assessment and consultation was undertaken by managers of the Adult Services Division. The response to the question, Mr Mayor, was very comprehensively given by the then responsible Cabinet member, Councillor Gareth Jones, and Councillor Jones laid all the facts before Council in terms of the chronology of events and the situation as was at that particular time. A report setting out the care needs assessment and consultation process, together with recommendations, was in fact expected prior to the last local elections in 2012, but for reasons that are still unclear, did not happen. Mr Mayor, time has moved on and Council will note from 2.1 of the report that best practice has been moving away for at least 10 years, substantial time in anybody's mind, I'm sure, from the residential home model, which is considered to be a far more outdated and indeed institutionalised model when compared to the supported accommodation model that is being proposed this evening. Quite clearly, residents and their families are concerned about potential new arrangements around the supported living model, and members will be aware of an email that has been circulated to all councillors within the last week or so. Some of the concerns, Mr Mayor, centre around various issues, particularly continuity of care, and these issues have in fact been addressed. In terms of staff trooping over to a new provider, they will still work for their respective or at their respective homes. Staff not wishing to continue with a new provider will either be redeployed within the council or may wish to take voluntary early retirement. But I must stress at this stage, Mr Mayor, any new provider will be a not-for-profit organisation. Carers and their families and the residents were also given the opportunity to visit supported accommodation establishments in Merthyr Tydfil, and in order to satisfy myself, I also visited two such establishments within the county borough. Comments from the families of residents and staff can be noted from the consultation feedback in section 4 of the report on pages 201 and 202. The best needs assessment was undertaken by an independent assessor who reached the conclusion that should it not pursue the option of deregistration, and I'm quoting you, Mr Mayor, the council would have missed an opportunity to enhance the potential for the residents to become more fully fledged citizens with increased diversity and quality of life experiences. Members will also note from 3.2 of the report that unlike residential care, supported living is not a prescriptive model of service design and can look very different for different people depending on their individual needs. In 4.7, members will note that some concern was expressed by relatives that the supported living model that they visited as part of the consultation process was not able to meet their family's needs. So in order to address this matter and to put their minds at rest, further visits are currently being arranged to a high complex needs scheme. The financial implications are set out in 5.1 of the report, and they are that if Council agrees to deregister both homes, there will in fact be an annual efficiency saving of some £74,000 plus an additional £20,000 income from leasing the buildings to any new potential provider. Mr Mayor, taking everything into account, particularly the ongoing well-being of the residents, issues raised by the relatives, staffing implications and indeed the sustainability of providing long-term care to residents of the County Borough with complex needs, I move the recommendations as set out on pages 203 and 204 of the report. 8.1, deregistration of Glendare and Parkview be agreed. 8.2, Glendare and Parkview be established as supported accommodation with a preferred provider. 8.3, if 8.1 is agreed, the Council entered into detailed negotiations with staff about opportunities for redeployment within the Council, TUPE or voluntary early retirement. And most importantly of all, Mr Mayor, 8.4, deregistration of Glendare and Parkview will not require the current residents to move from their homes, be noted.
Is there a seconder?
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to second the report.
Any questions? Mitten.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I may, I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay, so I'll ask them and hopefully they'll be answered then. Okay, if I can refer colleagues to page 200, 2.4, can I just ask, what percentage of the current residents of both the homes do we envisage will be able to live independently? Sorry, just to clarify, all of the residents would be able to live independently? Okay, so that leads me on to my second question then. I understand there's a high percentage of residents who, referring to what the leader mentioned, 4.7, have high complex needs. What percentage of the residents have high complex needs?
All the residents that reside in Glendare and Parkview are highly complex, but they're still able to live in a supported accommodation setting. We've had an independent assessor who've carried out best interest assessments on all individuals, and the outcome of that assessment was that the individuals would benefit from living in a supported accommodation setting. Thank you.
I'll re-clarify my questions then. My first question was, how many residents can live independently? And you answered that by saying that then they're all high risk and they can live in supported accommodation. For me, they are two different things. Do you want to clarify that for me?
But they would still be able to live in a supported accommodation setting.
The difference, that's not independently, is it? That's in a supported accommodation setting. Yeah? And then, Mr Mayor, if I may just ask my last question, and perhaps the leader can answer this because he did just refer to it, unless, of course, an officer wishes to do so. Sorry.
The supported accommodation will still be 24/7 care and support. Thank you.
That's okay. I was just referring to the external MENCAP report, just for clarification again, monitoring officer, but I'm happy with that response. Thank you. I'll finish in my last question, which is 8.4. Deregistration of Glendale and Parkview will not require the current residents to move from their homes to be noted. I appreciate that. But what guarantee do we have that this won't happen in the future post-deregistration?
Quite clearly, Mr Mayor, the residents who are currently residing at either Glendale or Parkview will never have to move from those homes. Okay? Residents who currently don't live in those homes, it doesn't apply to. So anybody living in those homes will not have to move.
May I add to that? The residents won't be residents any longer. They will become tenants in their own right, and they will be protected by tenants' rights.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Tydfil.
I notice in the report you state that there will be an annual efficiency saving of £74,000. I was just wondering where the saving of £74,000 comes from, really. If you could break down the £74,000.
44k will be the loss of a registered manager, because this would not be required in a supported accommodation, and the 30k costs would be for the running costs, such as the electricity, gas, etc. That's what it's costing us now with the two homes.
If I could ask, who's going to pay for the electricity?
Sorry, in a supported accommodation setting, the tenants would pay for that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My questions centre around what I would call, I think, what we'd all understand in terms of quality assurance measures. Could I ask, when we're talking about the external provider at 1.4, how will this external provider be determined and appointed?
Mr Mayor, if I can just come in before the professional officers give a reply to that. There is a procurement process for it, Gareth. There are providers providing similar accommodation and schemes within the county borough. Currently there are 20 of those people living in supported accommodation throughout the county borough. The procurement process, I think I'll need a professional officer to answer that.
I mean, it's essential that any procurement process actually addresses the issues that you've been raising around the complexity of the needs, and we would want to look at providers that have a reputation and a track record of successfully providing care for that level of complexity. And they are here in the district, and they are certainly in South Wales. So it would be our responsibility to select the most appropriate based on the complexity of the needs of the individuals that currently reside in the homes, but also the track record of those providers.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I refer to paragraph 3.4, which is on page 201, and the very last sentence of that. I read, the service users would be able to access additional monies in terms of housing benefit, which I'm sure is welcome. And it goes on to say, an additional support service cost being met through other funding streams. Could you clarify, please, what the other funding streams are?
I'm happy to do that, Mr Mayor. Clive, my understanding is that all tenants will be able to access the higher rate of DLA, which is currently £137 a week, which they cannot currently access. And also, there is a staggering sum of money here, which I've had to clarify, but it is correct, that we could also look to access 21 hours per person per week of supported people funding. This equates to approximately £16,575 per person per annum, but this is subject to availability of funding, so that is another one that I am aware of. I'm not sure of anything else, but perhaps the officers could clarify that as well.
Councillor Linda Matthews.
Yeah, Chair, I know there's been lots of questions and you can expect that, but I think perhaps this is one that the opposition won't be opposing, because we're being told it's best practice and it meets the best needs for these people, and I think perhaps the best needs of these people rises above the politics of the issue, because these are profoundly disabled. Sorry, I didn't know we were still on question.
Any more questions? Any comments? Right. I'm going to call Councillor Matthews first because she was speaking on comments.
Yes, sorry,
I'll call you back.
I didn't realise we were still on question. But being serious, these are profoundly disabled people, and we must be looking for what is best and the best needs for those people. I do appreciate as well as some of the opposition haven't had the opportunity, as some have, at scrutiny, because this all went to scrutiny and was discussed there. I also understand that a lot of people work and they can't make every meeting and you have to prioritise. But obviously, Councillor Mitten, social services scrutiny isn't a priority for you, having attended one meeting in the last 6 months. I've been in 2 and I'm not on the committee. But I think what is important that we, as I say, perhaps rise above the politics and say what is best for these people, because they haven't got a voice to speak for themselves, and we have to look at best needs and best practice. So I support this.
Gareth, I'm going to let the officer speak first, and I'll bring you back in on a comment, all right?
If she does, she can indicate the speaker.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, in part response to that last point, I just want to highlight to members that when we met with all the staff in both Glendale and Parkview, they were more concerned about the ongoing care and level of care for the residents than they were for their own positions. It was humbling and it was impressive. Now, unfortunately, we've not been able to progress until a decision is made about the future of both of these homes. But the indications are that the staff are very, very committed to what they refer to as their ladies. And they're very concerned about making sure that there is continuity of care. Now, there's no guarantee how many of those staff will agree to 2p across to any new provider. But certainly based on the conversations that we've had, we were, as I say, very impressed with their commitment to that group of people. And there's no reason to suggest that they won't transfer, or certainly a large number of them will transfer to achieve that continuity of care. And I think as employers, we ought to be actually very impressed with the way the staff at these homes have actually responded to these proposals.
Gareth Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, nothing's changed in the last few years then, since I was the cabinet member charged with social services. So I'm pleased to hear that. I'm just looking at 7.1.1, the positive impact, and I think if we all read that, that really is the key as far as I'm concerned. It says it all.
Councillor Alan Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to hear that the selection of a provider, an excellent provider, is essential. Not so much, well, it is important at present time, but when the staff at these venues change, new staff come in, it is absolutely essential that we've got a proper and excellent provider. I did make a little rise while, Mr. Mayor, when Councillor Matthews said that this important subject should be above politics, and then she makes what I consider to be a political point by having a go at an opposition member. it can't be above politics one sentence and then political the next.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just for clarification, I endorse what my colleague Councillor Jones has just said. He highlighted that very point for me. And for factual information, I was in SSR scrutiny in November. The chair of SSR scrutiny, the democratic officer and my leader are fully aware of the reason that I haven't been in the last 2 SSR scrutinies. However, I still contribute to them, Mr Mayor, so that's for clarification. And secondly, I may not have been in the last 2 SSR scrutinies, but I visited both residential homes. Not once, not twice, but several times in the last 4 years. Held meetings with the families and the staff and the housing manager. So there's my clarification. I wanted to ensure that when this report was brought to Council, Mr Mayor, that it was a robust report, that it would have a positive effect on those service users, residents, tenants, however they may be called in the future, and I wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was pleased to hear the comments from Councillor Mitten in terms of the visit she's carried out. So I'm presuming that from the comments she's made, she's probably supporting her colleague Councillor Gareth Jones in endorsing paragraph 7.1.1.
Well, I must say the Labour Council are making a very eloquent case for this now. But it has to be said that prior to the election, they would go, 2 of the councillors that are here now will go into these homes, stirring up trouble, accusing the independents of trying to privatise them. I mean, it's all very well saying it should be above politics. I've never previously made a public comment about this, but people on the council have, and they did cause a lot of distress to staff members and residents carers at the time. So to say it should be above politics, I think it's the Labour Party themselves should be looking internally.
Councillor Clyde Jones.
Well, can I just put Councillor Tydfil absolutely straight? I don't listen to any gossip. I don't go on Facebook. And for the facts are that I visited the home to put the situation right as far as I was concerned, and that was at the time that was clearly to be informed what the score was. It's as simple as that. I didn't go there for any other reason than to find out what the facts were.
Any other comments? No? Right then. Recommendations is on page 203. 203 to 204. Can I ask councillors to vote, please?
Councillor Goldsmith.
That's carried. Right, item number 21, appointments, director appointments. Leah. Right. Organisational structure of 2015, I think Councillor Toomey is taking.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, Mr Mayor, can I apologise to Council for this late report, but that was due to interviews taking place this week, the last of which took place, I think it was this afternoon at some point. So that's why the report is coming late to us this evening. The purpose of the report, Mr Mayor, is one, to recommend to Council the confirmation of Lorraine Buck as Corporate Director of People and Performance from 1st of April 2015, following an interview by the member panel on the 23rd of March 2015, and 2, to update on progress to implement the organisational structure following Council agreement on the 11th of March 2015. I don't suppose members have had the opportunity to read the report, Mr Mayor, so I will go through it very quickly. Members will note from 1.1, the Council agreed a new organisational structure at its meeting on the 11th of March 2015, and that the member appointments panel met on the 23rd of March 2015 to interview for the post of Corporate Director of People and Performance. The responsibilities of the post are, the corporate functions are performance, scrutiny, cultural change, workforce development, and the service functions being well-being and poverty, learning, social care, and prevention and early intervention. The post holder is also the designated lead director for children and young people under the Children's Act in Wales of 2004. Candidates were interviewed for the post of Corporate Director of People and Performance, and the member panel agreed to recommend to Council that Lorraine Buck be appointed on a permanent basis to the post commencing from 1st of April 2015, subject to the normal checks. And just to bring Council up to speed with other developments, Mr Mayor, in Section 2, members will note that following advertisement for the post of Head of Human Resources and Organisational Development, interviews were undertaken on the 24th of March 2015, and the post was offered to Lisa Jones, who is currently the interim Head of Human Resources. Following advertisement for the post of Chief Officer Social Services, and that would be the designated Director of Social Services, interviews on the 25th of March, which is today, took place, and the post was offered to Lisa Curtis-Jones, who is currently the Head of Children's Services. The initial slotting and matching process for the posts in the organisational structure has been completed by the Chief Executive, and affected staff will be notified of the outcomes within the next few days. Where there's a need for interviews for any of these posts, this will occur over the next 4 weeks. The recommendations, Mr Mayor, set out at number 3, or Section 3 of the report, are 3.1, that the appointment of Lorraine Buck as Corporate Director, People and Performance from the 1st of April 2015, subject to the normal checks, be confirmed. 3.2, the appointments of Lisa Jones as Head of Human Resources and Organisational Development, and Lisa Curtis-Jones as Chief Officer, Social Services from the 1st of April 2015, subject to the normal checks, be noted. And 3.3, that an update on the implementation of the organisational structure from the Chief Executive be provided to the scheduled full Council meeting on the 22nd of April 2015. I so move.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? Right, Councillors, I ask you to vote, please. That's carried. I got an extra item on the agenda, item number 22. It's an announcement by the leader. There'll be no questions, no comments. So, Councillor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just to put the opposition at rest, I'm not resigning. Not yet, anyway. Mr Mayor, members will or should be aware at least that there's going to be a special full council on the 1st of April, which is next Wednesday, I believe, and that's to discuss the aftermath of the Rotherham report, which was published several weeks ago. Mr Mayor, the meeting will be a one-item agenda, and it will be exempt under Section 100 of the Local Government Act. The reason for the announcement tonight, Mr Mayor, is can I urge all councillors to make every effort to attend this vitally important meeting. It is essential that anybody who can be here is actually in their seat for that particular meeting. Thank you.
Right, I have no other urgent business or correspondence. I have no communications myself, except to thank you all for attending and wish you a safe journey home. Good night.